Right now you're hearing music made with my new Ableton Live Pack VCR Wave. This contains samples of Teenage Engineering's OP1's Dr. Wave's synth engine recorded directly to VHS tape, specifically my copy of Pump Up the Volume starring Christian Slater. Each sound gets this warmth of the VCR tape to give you a nice vintage lo-fi, really cool, interesting sound. If you're listening during the month of May 2020, then this is the download for the Music Production Club, so go to brianfunk.com to learn more. On today's episode, I have Tine Schenck, and Tine is part of the team that runs Music Challenges Weekly. We are collaborating on the challenge starting Friday, May 15th at 8 p.m. UK time. So at that time on Twitter, we're going to announce a music production challenge for you to do, and you have a week to do it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be announced on the Twitter channel at Music Weeklies and on my website, brianfunk.com. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk, a musician from New York, and today I have a very special guest. I have Tine Schenck, and Tine is responsible for the Music Weekly Challenges that I first ran into on Twitter. It's a really cool group or community, maybe we could say, where you're given a challenge every week around making music, and it gives you some sort of focus, some sort of parameters and limitations with your music making that I think is extremely helpful and probably almost the key to actually getting anything done. So this is right up my alley lately. If you've listened to some of the recent episodes, we've been talking about this concept a lot. So I'm really happy to have a chance to talk with Tine. How's it going, Tine?
It's going well, Brian. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Glad that you wanted to have us. I say us because we're three people in Music Weeklies.
So that's you, and there's Andrew and...
Yeah, Andrew Magee from Scotland and Clément Panchout from France, who started the whole thing. And I'm based in Norway, so...
Oh, wow.
International team.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So maybe I can ask you to get your take and tell us about what the Music Weekly Challenges are for everyone that might not know, how it came about, or, just the story of this really cool project.
Yeah, it's... First of all, it's a Twitter-based weekly challenge to compose an original piece to a given theme. So each Friday we drop a theme, and then you sit down with that theme for a week and reveal what you made on the next Friday. So it's basically open for anyone who wants to make music. You don't have to be a pro in any way, and I certainly wasn't. And it's been going for a year and a half approximately, and we've built a great community. So it's not just a challenge, but it's also a place to share music and to share ideas and concepts, and yeah, it's become a nice little social circle actually. And I think it started out, I'm not exactly sure how this goes, but there was some sort of thing that started quite a few years ago. I'm not sure exactly when, maybe 2015 or something. But it never got any traction. So it was called a Music Weeklies Challenge, but it was run by someone else. And then a year and a half ago, Clément in France, he took it over and decided to boost it. And he just went away and, started following masses of people who then followed him back. And that's how I found it, because Music Weekly's challenge followed me. And apparently I was in pretty early on, which I didn't realize, but I was taking part in, I think, something like the 4th challenge or something after the relaunch. And then after some time, we sort of grew into people who were more active in the group, and then Clément invited Andrew and I to be part of the team who's sort of working on it and running it together. So yeah, our main idea is to just get people creating and to help them, to encourage them, and to give them a theme to write to. and to be open-minded about what the results are going to be.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to get people making music. And the fact that it's weekly is, it's regular enough where it keeps you coming back, because it can be easy to take a lot of time off, especially after you finish something, to kind of go, and sit back and relax. And the community part is great too, because it's sometimes hard to find people to share your music with and talk to. And the fact that everyone is going through the same challenge and interpreting it in their own ways gives everyone a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. And we've seen other challenges that have a lot of submissions, but there isn't a conversation. And that's something that we've been focusing on from the beginning, that we want to build a community and we want to talk to people and we want people to talk to each other. So what we see in our submissions is that people tend to feedback each other and discuss sort of, oh, that's interesting what you did there, or wow, what a cool key change, or yeah, it's been really heartwarming to follow, actually, because in the beginning it was just Clément who then feedbacked everyone very sort of patiently and persistently. And then Andrew got more involved with feedbacking everyone, and then I got involved. And then now we've grown into this space where we, as the team, we don't have to take so much part anymore, because it's sort of other members of the group are feedbacking each other and talking to each other. And that's really nice to see, actually, because none of us are people who really need a lot of credit or power. So we like that we can step back a little bit sometimes and just let the people sort of talk to each other. So there isn't a hierarchy, and that's really nice to be part of.
Yeah, that's cool. You kind of like set the tone for the community, and then as people join, they kind of pick up on that and get involved. Yeah. What do you think is it that inspires the conversation around certain challenges, but maybe not so much others?
I don't know. It depends, I guess, on what the challenge is. And so, for instance, we've had a couple of challenges that were very restrictive in terms of, one was only use 2 instruments, and one was only use 1 instrument. And then we had one that was with a given set of samples, with I think there was like a package with 100 samples or something, and then you had to use those exclusively. And stuff like that tends to get a lot of discussion, maybe more than when we do the Wild West challenge or, more thematic challenges. So I guess people discuss a lot of the process often, and wow, how did you make that happen? Or what's the plugin? And, it's, I don't know. But we generally see quite a lot of discussion nowadays, and it's more of a circumstance of the community growing. And then now that we have more people, and more people are also there to discuss. And we do also see that we had a big upswing in numbers after we did like a big anniversary event back in October.
Okay.
And so now we have an increasing amount of submissions, and then maybe if one challenge will have 20 submissions sometimes, and then all those 20 people tend to listen to the other people's challenges. And yeah, it's just creating discussion almost regardless. Also because people don't stick to a genre, which is very nice. And the submissions can span a lot of genres. We have a few metal people who sort of regularly chuck in some hardcore. I don't even know what it's called, because I come from classical music, so it's just a whole range of things to talk about, really.
Yeah. Well, as we're recording this right now, you're ending a weekly challenge about cartoon music.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
and that's a pretty, it's broad. You know, it is specific, but it's also broad because there's so many types of cartoons. And the interpretation part, I guess, would yield, it's not a genre thing really when you say cartoon music, but it does imply certain things, I suppose. And I could see how that would be pretty interesting to just see like what everyone is doing to achieve that goal of making cartoon music, whatever that means to them.
Yeah, and I foresee that we'll see quite some interesting sound design in this one. And then you have other challenges that are maybe more restrictive in terms of, let's say, chiptune. It's sort of already a genre.
Right.
And it's still interesting to see how people then take that concept and then still develop something of their own. So, but we have had, it's interesting to see because we have often, we had a challenge that was rainbows and unicorns. And the results there just span from the most ridiculous and My Little Pony music to severely dystopian.
Really?
So it's basically, we don't have any rules as to where you take the prompt. You just get the prompt, the theme, and then you do whatever you want. It doesn't have to conform to anything, apart from when we set restrictions like only use one instrument, for instance. So
right.
it's...
And how often are you participating in the challenges? Do you do it every week?
I try. Right now, I've been busy the last few months, and it's been less. But I was pretty regular until maybe January, and then I got some other projects. So now it's more when I have the time. But I try to make something at least once a month or something like that. But Clément, I think that's still a running statistic, is he's actually written something for each challenge.
Really? So
and he's been running it the whole time. So he's written like 60 pieces or something for
wow.
this. Well, it's pretty impressive.
How have you found forcing yourself to finish a project within a week has changed the way you work?
Oh,
or has
man,
it?
that's changed. Yeah, a lot. And I can say I got involved in this a year and a half ago, and I have a music education from way back when, but then I did other stuff. I was an academic and did totally different things, nothing to do with music. And so I only got back into writing music maybe 3 years ago. And I'm a singer, so I was sort of, I'll do songwriting because I want to write for my own instrument and blah, blah, blah. And I would spend so much time on each song. And it was thoroughly demotivating because I felt that I could never finish them. I was working on them, and there's also a very steep learning curve when you start writing music in a DAW compared to, I'm 40, so when I got my education, we were composing on paper, you know, and so there was a lot to learn. And I also find that what happened when I got involved in Music Weeklies was I had to learn good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
There is a deadline on Friday, and the first 6 months I would sit the whole week with just that piece and sort of frantically finish it. And then you just learn, and it's quicker eventually, right? Because I now, after 6 months of using a compressor, I sort of got, that's what it does. And all those things that sort of I was fretting over before. And now I'm pretty comfortable with submitting something that's not perfect. And it's also made me able to actually take work in the music realm. So I now write for video games, and I feel comfortable doing deadlines for projects now because I learned from the challenge, basically.
Nice. Yeah, it makes you kind of decide what's important and what's not when you have that deadline.
Yeah.
Like you just don't have 5 hours to select the snare drum if you need it done in a day or two.
No. Yeah.
It's just move on.
Yeah, and I could get so stuck on vocals because I'm a singer. And I wanted it to be perfect, and you know how much time I spent on that, just getting a recording right when you don't have a studio.
Right.
So what I also discovered with Music Weeklies was composing instrumental. That's actually more my thing. And I didn't even realize until I was forced to do stuff in shorter time spans, because there wouldn't be any time for me to do vocals or even write lyrics or all those things. So now I virtually stopped songwriting. I prefer to sing other people's songs. And I almost exclusively write just instrumental. And that's been just a journey in itself to go from classic verse, chorus, bridge, chorus style songwriting to more organic writing, maybe. Stuff that's less bound by a form. So, yeah, I've learned a lot.
Yeah, vocals are interesting like that because, you know, for one, I mean, for me, it's hard just to sing them right, you know, and the voice is so like unwieldy and unpredictable, at least in my case. But you also need to have things you're saying, so you can't even just get the notes right. It's also, what are you actually saying? It has to be good too. So it's a whole other layer of things to worry about.
And I actually hate writing lyrics, so I'm not sure songwriting was for me from the get-go.
Okay, there you go.
I think I got very stuck in this whole that's my instrument mentality. And then Music Weeklies helped me shed that a little bit and sort of find a whole other identity within music. So I now think of myself more as a composer, less as a singer, really.
Right. Well, it's pretty interesting how just doing it over and over again kind of reveals what your specialty is. It kind of like makes you see like what you're able to do well and what is holding you up. Whereas if you have forever, you know, you don't get to explore different ways of working.
Yeah, and also being a singer in the time of Melodyne is not necessarily the most fruitful because when you record vocal takes, they're never going to be, you know, perfectly tuned to equal temperament.
Right.
And just having to conform to those standards, it's frustrating as a singer because I guess I'm a classically trained singer, but I come maybe more from singing jazz, and we play with tonality, right? You bend tones and you do blue notes, and that doesn't really exist anymore in mainstream music so much. And I guess I just got very stuck in the whole vocal thing, and then it was very useful to revisit this other identity that back in school I was really loving recording, but composing, I mean. But then, I don't know, we were very tied to our instrument back then.
Yeah.
So it's been a personal journey for me to sort of find my space in instrumental music, actually.
Right. So you said you have like classical and jazz training, and you also mentioned an academic background. Maybe you can tell me more about like where you're coming from with your music training, how you got into music and all that.
Yeah. I come from a family with a lot of music, and my father has always been I guess amateur jazz musician, but with a very strong footing within classical. And I have like a whole row of piano teachers and people who play piano and everything. And I started playing piano when I was 7 or something. And I also started in a choir when I was 7. And then I just did music the whole time. I mean, I took piano lessons for years, and that was my thing. And we have music high schools here in Norway. So you do something of a conservatory prep, basically, where they give you a very thorough music education in practice. So we had something like 20 hours of music each week, where you got,
Wow.
a lot of training in. We had 3 instruments, and we were taught conducting and composing and blah, 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 and all those things, and all the theory. And this was all classical based, and I played classical piano, so I got my training classical wise, I guess, in the classical realm. And then when I was 19 and finished the school, and the next step would be applying for a conservatory, I just didn't have the confidence to go on with that. I don't know. I think I felt like there are very, very many female vocalists, and you have to be very good to get into conservatory. And this school was so tuned into that part of music. So I didn't even really consider that I could be a vocalist in other ways or a musician in other ways, and I don't know,
Right.
get sort of stuck. So I went into, first I became a lawyer by training. Never really worked like one, but a little bit, I guess. And then I decided law wasn't really my thing. This was after 5.5 years of studying law.
Isn't that a
so
shame?
I became an archaeologist.
Oh my God. That's the shame about schooling. When you go to college, you're training to do this thing you don't even know if you're going to like.
No, and you're like 19 when you choose.
Yeah.
And it's really, being at uni, you don't get any semblance of working life.
Right.
And I think towards the end there, I was thinking, well, I don't actually want to have a job with law. I don't want to sit at a desk and work with papers.
Mm-hmm.
And I also really always just wanted to be a musician, and I was just searching for something else to sort of fill that space.
Right.
And law was not motivating me enough. And then I tried archaeology, which I did I decided I'd stick with archaeology just because it's student loans and blah, 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 all those things. And I did that for quite 10 years maybe. And then I got some health issues and I had to stop working. And that's when I sort of came back to music, because it turned out I could still do music fine without any problems.
Mm.
And I had this, or I still have, chronic headaches. And that was sort of, sounds weird, but music was one of the few things that I could really do with the headaches. So,
Right.
and I think that's because you forget everything, time and place and pain, or at least I do. I just fall into the music and it sort of blocks everything else out.
Yeah.
And so I've had this whole, I don't know, it's been like an identity reboot to come back to music that was secretly always my dream.
Mm-hmm.
And my headaches even got better. So I decided I'll give this a go and try. I've also always been a gamer. So to start writing for games, sort of a very, very short step for me.
Right. It sometimes all comes together.
Yes.
You can see the way the path converges when you look back, but it's hard to see moving forward.
Yeah, I guess. And also just having a classical background, it can help with a lot of game music, actually, because there's a big trend on orchestral
Yeah.
game music at the moment. So, yeah, I feel like I could weave in all my previous musical background into this.
That's really cool. I can relate to a lot of what you said, especially with like school and trying to figure out what you're supposed to be when you're, still a teenager, basically.
Yeah.
So I teach high school English as my real grown-up job.
Mm-hmm.
And I've taught the seniors, which are the 17, 18-year-olds before. And a lot of them are, they're really stressed out about their life. What am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. And there's always one or two kids in the class that have it all figured out. And they get really like upset by that because like, I don't know what I want to be. And I always kind of try to make them feel a little better and relate to them. I say, like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. and
Yeah.
and to tell them, like, what you're really feeling is actually opportunity. There's just so much opportunity in front of you. But we do sort of put this on young people that you have to figure this thing out, and then you got to learn it, and then you got to go and do it for the rest of your life. And that's too much to decide when you're still developing.
You're supposed to do this thing for 50 years maybe, and it's crazy to make that choice when you're less than 20.
Right.
I don't know when you guys start college in the US, but we are typically 19 when we finish high school.
People graduate, they'll be turning 18 at some point during that year, whether it's before or after they graduate. But about 18. And
that's so young.
It is. And I made a lot of decisions at 18 that I would hate to have affect my whole life.
Yeah, what I've learned from my own personal story, let's say, is that it's never too late.
Yeah.
And okay, I am from a privileged country where education is free, which of course makes it much easier to redecide later on and go back and do something else. So I studied in the UK for 4 years, and that was sort of a bit eye-opening to me as well, because these people, they're 17 when they finish high school or whatever they call it, their A-levels. And so I went to uni with these people who were 17 years old. I was doing a doctoral program, and some of them were 21 when they started the doctoral program.
Wow.
And I know here that average ages in Norway for, graduating a doctoral program is something like 38 years old. So we're a little slower on the uptake than in Britain. But then also seeing them and knowing how much money that education costs them to do, because it's insanely expensive in Britain to do university education. And then you can't just do it twice, always. But why would we need to pick at 17? That's sort of, it's a bit disturbing when especially now that I'm a proper adult and think about what I was like at 19.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember going to school, and I was going for English, and then it was for teaching English because I didn't know what to do with that, really. And my biggest fear was like, what if I don't like this? I might walk in that classroom and decide I hate this, because I really I never thought of myself as someone that would get up and speak in front of people. I kind of don't know why I thought I could do that. But it turns out I love it. But I kind of feel like I got lucky on that, because I was really like concerned going into, because at the end of your schooling, you actually go into the classroom and you kind of shadow another teacher. And at that point I was like, this is it. I might not like this. And I made a decision for my life to do this.
So you studied teaching, or you studied English, or both?
It was English first for undergraduate, and then for master's graduate was teaching English.
Yeah.
And that was really...
But then you at least already knew that you were interested in the topic or the subject, I guess.
Yeah, and what it really was, though, is it was really music, but I realized in English, too, there's like that creative aspect. That's something I've always been drawn to, is just creativity. I used to love to draw and make my own comic books, and then it was music, and everything I enjoyed had some of that element to it. And so when I finally realized that was in English, I got interested in that. And but then you finish that, and it's like, well, now what are you going to do?
I guess it's often okay to just take a teaching degree and then you're able to actually do like real work.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like studying English, but I know people who study Norwegian at university just for academic purposes. They don't get a job in just being an academic with Norwegian as their main subject. You have to teach, or Yeah. I mean, archaeology was at least something where you can go on a dig and you don't have to be an academic to make it work. But yeah, I've always also been very drawn to the creative side. And actually, I found research really creative.
Yeah.
In the sense that when you're a researcher, you get to make up a problem and then solve it, and someone else pays for it. And well, you of course have to do it within a form, but it's creative problem solving.
Right.
And guess that's how I could stick with that.
I think
did you do a lot of writing then in your English
I did
studies?
Yeah, but it was more writing for like analyzing literature and that kind of stuff. There was, I guess, like some poetry, but not so much. Yeah, so I mean, it was like it probably wasn't my first love, you know. I think in a way though, I did really want to do music, but I was never a kid in school doing music. Like my music background was learning the guitar at 14, playing in bands and taking some guitar lessons and just learning that way. I was more in rock and roll school of thought. So I don't read music. So I didn't have like that formal training, but I think it did teach me a lot about like improvisation and the songwriting aspect. And I did want to do music in school, but that was like, you know, I was behind, first of all. And that was another like, what are you going to do with that kind of thing? And I took a lot of music classes wherever I could as far as like the electives go. And I think that the fact that I didn't get the formal education as much, it made me work harder on my own education. And then once, you know, we got the internet and YouTube and all of that, then I really dug deep into that with like recording and songwriting and stuff like that. So it was like, in a way, I'm kind of glad it worked out the way it did because now, kind of like you in a way, like my music and my teaching have come together in this like this unexpected way that I never really saw coming.
Well, I've thought about that a lot when I listen to your episodes because I am a regular listener, and you have a gift when it comes to educating people, and in not educating like top down, but encouraging. And I really like that. And I think that meshes with a lot of the values that we have in Music Weeklies as well.
Oh, thanks.
And
that's
just
cool to hear because that's, I for me, like inspiration, I really value that. I feel like it's so precious. And, you know, once you get it, you got to act on it. And whenever I get inspired, it's like, it's a gift. Like, oh, thank you so much. You know, you made me want to do something. and a lot of the way I listen to music is searching for that. And a lot of the things I do, my reading and everything kind of at its root has this like search for inspiration. So that's, I guess, something I'm hoping to be able to pass on or offer where I can. And sometimes just trying to do that even makes me inspired. When I start thinking about it and talking about it, then I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm pumped up.
Yeah, that's great. I also really appreciated an episode you did about going pro or not going pro. That's long ago, I think.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me as well. The whole fact that going pro puts a lot of stress on you in terms of you have to conform to other people's needs when you create. And I was a hobby musician until recently, I guess. And just to have total freedom to create as well. And to help inspire others through that, I guess.
That's a good example of my worlds colliding because I think I did like the Hamlet to be or not to be speech in there, and like made the comparison. But it's really true. Like with success comes a price, and with once you do something as a job, it becomes work, and it's easy to look at the glory and the glamour of doing stuff like music, especially, when you see like people on TV winning the awards, playing in front of hundreds of thousands of people. But that comes at a price. And I think when I was in some bands playing, we decided to we really wanted to make it as a band, and we would set up our own little tours. We went down the East Coast of the United States and back a couple times. And as much as I loved it, I kind of realized I love this, but I'm glad it's over. I'm not ready. And it was only 2 weeks maybe. And I had the same thing happen to me when I was a kid, actually. When I was a kid, really young, all I wanted to do was be a professional baseball player. And I just loved baseball, and that's just what I wanted to do. But when I got a little bit older, probably around high school, and I realized how much baseball that actually meant I'd have to play if I was ever actually going to get anywhere with it. I was just nah, it's too much. I love it, but if it became, because in high school it changed, because now it's all serious, and if we lost, it was upsetting, and we'd get punished, and we'd have to mope and be sad on the ride home on the bus. And it was just wait a minute, this was a fun game, and now we just took it all away.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I remember thinking when I decided to study law is I don't want to work on a cruise ship as a singer, because that, and I don't mean that people don't get joy from that, but I just felt that I'm not that person who wants to work in the night, or I'm not also never really wanted to be a big name, just wanted to do music. But I remember thinking, oh my God, it's going to be exhausting to be a touring musician or a musician who's constantly doing gigs. And I wasn't picturing that for myself, because it seems like so much work. And I'm really glad that I got this rebirth as a musician, at, I guess, 37 or whatever I was when I started writing again, and just doing it for me, and not because I want to be seen or heard by anyone. I don't even need people to necessarily listen to my music, although I like the idea of doing it for money. So I would like people to buy it. But I write music for games, and they buy my music, and I don't actually need to then have fans on top of that. I just want to be able to make music, and that's what resonated with me in the whole GoPro or not GoPro episode, is that freedom, and that there isn't only one way to be a musician. There are so many ways in which you can be a musician, and it can be writing something from field recordings, like your recent guest Stephanie Merchak does a lot. And you do also seem to do a lot of sound design and field recordings in your music. It's
I agree with you on that. There's so much freedom in that. And what happened with me in making my sound packs, and then tutorials, and now the podcast, it's I have this job now of doing musical work and talking about music, and then the actual making music part is just the fun result of that. And it's not this has to be important and it has to matter. It doesn't. And there is, I guess, probably some benefit to having that pressure too. But I'm pretty happy with how it's winding up for me, and I enjoy everything I do, which is, I think, the whole reason I started doing this in the first place.
Yeah, and it's I think easy if you have. Okay, I'm not really in that position, but I could foresee that if I was, for instance, touring, or singing at a club or something, that it would quickly become the slog for me. Whereas now I've rediscovered writing music and how much I enjoy that. And I was so tied to this whole vocalist identity that this new freedom came with starting to actually compose and to start to write music that I would never expect that I could write. And that's... Yeah, it's been so much freedom in just finding that too, because when you write for games, for instance, you submit like samples, and then that's already something that is more maybe in your style, and yeah, they often, game developers will have like certain emotions that they want to rise, or there is certain scenarios you illustrate, or there is a battle scene or something, but there is a lot of freedom in that creative process as well, which I feel it's now fulfilling me in a whole other way than I could ever picture it would if I was a gigging musician. So, yeah, I have to thank Clément for sort of bringing me into Music Weeklies, actually, where I got, I guess you could say, some kind of schooling. And it's definitely been, I've evolved as a musician so much just the year and a half since I started taking part in the challenge. It's incredible, actually.
Well, I guess like the video game music has got to be a lot like making music for games, where you have these parameters, these challenges, like, oh, we've got a battle scene and it needs to feel this way, or like you said, different emotions that need to be conveyed at this part in the game.
I mean, yeah, maybe that's why it resonated with Clément. I don't know. Clément is a game composer, and he got this on his feet, and his network, I guess, is mainly in games. So a lot of the people who were in Music Weekly's challenge to begin with were also game composers or aspiring game composers. But now we also see a wider variety of people who want to take part, and we're trying to reach out and also sort of branch out and reach more musicians that are not necessarily in game music. Or, I mean, most people who submit to us make music in a DAW, but we don't require you to write anything in a DAW. You can just sit and play something on your guitar and record, and still sort of be part of the community and the challenge. As long as it's original, it's welcome with us. So, and I guess, I don't know, Clément already had sort of a experience with game composition from a while back, I think. But Andrew, I think, is also, like me, was more in the starting segment of things when we got involved in this, and we both really have seen a development. And I think the important part of that has been the encouragement that we get from the community, to inspire us both to try new things, which you do not just because it's a theme for the challenge, but also there is a lot of space in this group, the social group, to just try something new and weird and wonderful. And to me, it's meant a lot just to have that community, I think, to give me the confidence to try out different things and to realize that things don't have to be perfect. People can still enjoy listening to my music. Maybe they didn't even hear that I couldn't use a compressor right. Most likely they didn't. And it's definitely would love for more people to take part, because I got so much out of that for myself.
Yeah, the overall like vibe of the community is very open to experimentation and challenge and trying new things without worrying about so much if it comes out great or not. The point is more like to just go through with it and see what happens. That was something Stephanie spoke a lot about when we chatted. Like, she's just not afraid to do something that won't work. Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that aspect of her kind of philosophy.
Yeah. You can always just delete it, right? It's not, I try to do that too more. I have developed my patented flat hand technique for, because I compose everything by improvising on the keyboard controller. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a plan, and I never start with a melody, etc., etc. But I guess I also come from jazz, so I like these fantastic dense chords, and I sometimes just put my hand down flat on a whole octave or something, like make a cluster, or I've even used my whole arm sometimes. And why wouldn't I? Because it's total freedom. You can just, it takes a few seconds to try it.
Yeah.
And maybe you spend 10 minutes on it, and then you find out, it didn't really work. But you've only gained something, really, because you learned something and you tried it, and you learned maybe a new technique, like banging your arm down on the keyboard. Or, I think, to me, just shedding the whole idea of someone expects a certain thing from me has been very meaningful.
Yeah.
To find the confidence to just do whatever, really. And I have now ended up writing a horror soundtrack where there is a lot of space for just dissonance and odd signatures and disturbing or emotional or sad or paradoxical use of music. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I would have ever considered that 2 years ago when I was still stuck in the rut of songwriting, like writing orchestral horror. But the space is important to learn, I guess, to take that space back.
Right.
Or for me, certainly.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to like, I guess you find yourself in so many unusual places when you're doing a game, for instance, or a film or whatever it is, really. You would never... I guess I've had this experience recently. I was making some little bits of music for some like openings to some like YouTube or Twitch channels, actually, for so make it a long story short, my wife does like tabletop board gaming. They have a store, and they were gonna have this big expo 2 weeks ago in person, but that had to be canceled. And so they decided to do it all online, and then they were live streaming stuff. So they needed some music, and I got cast to do that. And it was just, it threw me way out of my zone. Like I found myself looking for like tribal chants and like these like all these instruments I've never used, and I kind of realized, like, as much as I've had in like my Ableton Live library, I don't have like any like chants I can use. So I went into like the live packs that were available and got one, and like I just had so much fun trying to figure out how to use those types of instruments that I've just never done. And I learned a lot. And it was just really satisfying to come up with something that they were happy to use.
Yeah.
Because when I started, I really didn't know if I could do it. I said I'll give it my best, but I was like, this might not turn out good.
Yeah, there's been a lot of not a lot. There's been a few of those challenges that I've taken part in too that were like, okay. One was, for instance, corporate. And I think I had 3 tries to try and make some sort of upbeat, positive music that someone could use in a presentation, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of, you have to have lots of 8s going or 16ths or whatever.
Yeah.
And then just to actually not be so restricted by the expectations you put on yourself, I guess. Because often other people don't necessarily put those expectations on you.
Yeah.
But I had this whole thing, it has to be corporate or whatever. And then I decided, nah, that's not my style. And then to feel confidence in just going out of that zone a little bit, regardless of whether you end up doing something new or not. Just trying to do something new, I think, is valuable.
Yeah.
But I still haven't made metal, though.
I had to do a little bit of metalish stuff for that that virtual tabletop, Dungeons and Dragons, and some of those themes I've decided could use like some metal guitar chugging. So it was fun to. I had to like kind of dig into that a little. But I think what happens too is when you make music for yourself, I know this happens to me. I guess like I see myself as this like complex person with so many different dimensions, and it's so hard for me to narrow in on like what mood I want to work on or what attitude or what emotions. But when you have the project and it needs to be corporate, for instance, like, okay, like it's put a spotlight on something that is a lot harder for me to do for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I can only keep saying it's so useful to just be given new perspectives in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can see in a lot of people who've taken part regularly in our challenges too, that they are developing some kind of skill set, or a lot of us, I think, gain more confidence just by sharing regularly. And we're also a very supportive community, not just feedbacking each other in terms of, oh, what a smooth key change, but also regardless of level, people will chip in and say, hey, that's great work. We're so glad that you actually took part, and this is great. And even if you listen to something that you think is, okay, maybe I wouldn't listen to this for my own spare time, but it also makes me listen to a lot of music that I wouldn't necessarily put on when I open my music thingy. And it's been useful in that way too. And this is, I think, how I got into horror. Just I always loved orchestral music, but I never really listened a lot to horror music. But then there were a few composers in this group who were doing that, amongst others, Clément, Panchout. And it gave me a whole other perspective in terms of, oh, but this is a space that I want to have a look at and try out for myself. And I still get those experiences when we do challenges. Like we did the one instrument challenge that we did was actually we vote once a month on challenge ideas that the community submitted, and that was my idea. But I was also very pleased that they voted it to be the challenge, because it gave me the opportunity to try something completely new, because it's something that I never really do, use only one instrument.
Yeah.
So I used 20 instances of Addictive Keys default piano preset, and made a piece with percussion and all sorts of wonky little bits and bass lines, and it was just to have that space to just, I don't know, I think a lot of us think of this group as this is where we try new stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come with a prize. It's just, you just win from doing it. And that's profoundly meaningful to me, just also for my own fulfillment. I mean, mainly for my own fulfillment.
Well, it's so important to have a space where you can do that and just expand your abilities and your figure, like for you, like you said, you really learned a lot about the type of musician you are and the type of composer you are. Without this regular activity, who knows what the path might have been.
I would probably still be in a rut with songwriting and on the verge of giving up. I hope not, but I'm very grateful that I got involved in this. And in terms of just building skills as well, it's just the regular exposure to having to do something.
Yeah.
Like once a week, I have to figure out how to use that compressor. I keep using compressing as an example, just because I thought it was so hard to hear what it actually did.
Yeah.
And it's just, I had to do it so many times before I could hear what it did. And that's why I think it's a good example. It's one of those exposure things. You just have to be exposed to it so many times.
I agree. I still feel like I'm learning about them every time I use them.
Yeah.
Usually less is more. I keep learning more and more. A little bit goes a long way.
I still don't really know what to do with the limiter, but hey. I'm big on ozone and neutron, and I'll let them do the things.
Yeah, I love those too. I do enjoy mixing and putting things together in that way, but kind of only to a point. Like once it gets too technical and I'm splitting hairs too much, I do lose interest in that. Lucky for me, I kind of like when things are a little raw and fuzzy.
Yeah.
So it's not that big a deal.
No, I like that too.
So, but it is a lot of fun, but that's music really. And I was thinking about that when you said about the conservatory. It starts to get so technical and there's so much pressure to be perfect, as perfect as can be, that it can take a lot of the fun out of it, at least in my case, and I guess a little bit for you too.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess in a way I'm happy that I didn't go that path. Or I don't think I would have been accepted because I was sort of a mediocre classical singer. I'm fine enough, but I'm not a star. And we had some real stars in our class and they weren't even accepted. So I guess it would have just been very discouraging, I think, if I'd gone down that path.
Yeah, I could understand why people like it, like that pursuit of perfection and just seeing how far you can push yourself. It's like athletics, really, I guess. It's just a different medium, but it's not what I personally enjoy about doing music. So, yeah, that's kind of why I never got that technically proficient at anything.
Yeah, but you also put sort of laid down the terms for your own education, and that means a lot, right? It gives some kind of, I don't know exactly how to say that, but then you choose the elements that you actually want to learn, right? Instead of having to sit through conducting for 2 years, which we did, which was my least favorite of all the subjects. And I've been in a choir forever, so I'm very happy that there are conductors. It just was not for me.
Right.
And we had some of those subjects. And then to have to go through that and be graded in these things, it's just, it feels not that fulfilling, although I'm glad I did it. Mm-hmm. But I'm also happy that I now got this opportunity to build my own skill set and sort of learn how to use logic from bottom up, and took some courses on Udemy or whatever, and just went through the whole thing and learned how to use the software and still figuring it out, and then sort of choosing that, oh yeah, I want to write for games. I don't want to write for songs, so I don't have to maybe sit and be super proficient at Melodyne. I want to be good at writing phrasing for violins, you know. So it's freedom in choosing the elements you want to learn, right?
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
At least it feels like it for me. It's,
definitely.
And that's also a thing that we want to do in Music Weeklies, is help people build their skill set. So we actually started a series of webinars and just had a 3-part sort of mixing masterclass going on with an audio engineer called Keith Lewis, who's part of our group. So we sort of also want to now, I think we're taking a step back and considering what can we do for this community now that we've gotten to this point where we have something that it's established, and we sort of decided that we want to help other people have sort of build their skill set and be able to first of all learn how to write music and to feel comfortable in writing it, but also we want to enable them to maybe even find work within it.
Right.
And but without wanting to only cater to pro musicians. So,
well, the beginners of today are the pros of tomorrow, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Help them get there.
Yeah. And we also don't really care if they're going to be great or not.
Yeah.
It's just if they want to make music, they are welcome to our midst. So,
well, that's the cool thing about art. You can participate without being great or amazing. You know, it's not. It doesn't have to be about that to be enjoyed.
No, that's very true.
You had mentioned you were busy finishing up an album. Are you
yeah.
willing to talk about that at all?
Yeah, it's a game that is it's a French game. It's an indie game, so they just released their demo, so I think it's going to be released later in the year. And I wrote the soundtrack, which is sort of an orchestral hybrid type thing, a la, I guess, inspired by Silent Hill.
Okay.
And also the movie 1408, is that what it's called? It's about John Cusack and is it Samuel L. Jackson or something, or a haunted hotel thing. But they had these references for me that I that they wanted sort of that soundscape, and then I got to just try stuff out, which was liberating and a very interesting process. And I was just now, I'm reworking stuff into album versions, because when you write for games, you write in loops.
Yeah.
So you have to submit everything in loops. And then one piece is maybe 4 different loops. One for exploration, one for increased stress, one for danger, and one for battle, for instance. So you don't actually write a piece to be heard as a whole in one go. And so now I have to rework everything to be album versions,
right, so
which is proving to be more work than I thought.
Yeah, I guess a character moving around in the world that determines it normally.
Yeah, and game music can be kind of repetitive. So it's a matter for an album, you don't want stuff to be that repetitive, right? Because there isn't a distraction in the form of playing the game. So still working on that, but I'm hoping to be able to finish it by Friday, because it's Bandcamp Day again.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And I just set this deadline for myself that, okay, Friday, it's going to be done.
Wow. Okay, that, just so everyone knows, is 2 days from now. We're recording this on what, I don't even know the date, April 29th. So you've got 2 days. But I'm sure that has really giving you a lot of structure for the next 48 hours or so.
Yes, a little too much, but it's also I was planning on releasing it, just after Christmas, and then stupidly enough didn't really set a deadline for myself, and then I said yes to lots of collabs and more projects, and I'm now also involved in developing a music game from the ground up, which came in January, sort of knocked on my door, and I had to say yes to, I felt. So it's been sort of just lying around, and I've felt it weighing on my shoulders because I really want it out there for my CV, really. I want to be able to show that, here is a soundtrack that I made.
Right.
And it's something that I feel I need it for my portfolio. So it's been good to set a little bit of a strict deadline and just, good enough is good enough. And I'm not going to split hairs. And I sit and I think, ooh, that crescendo is like a 16th too short. But no one else is going to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So it's useful to just also let those things go a little bit and like, okay, I'm the only one who can hear this because I'm the only one who knows what I intended it to be.
Right.
So
it's good to remember that when you release something and you put it out, people kind of assume that's the way you meant it to be, even if it's a little off from your vision.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
They're going to listen to it like, this is what she meant. Like, this is Tine's vision right here.
Yeah.
But that is
exactly that.
A thing about art is it's like it's a representation of the idea. It's not exactly the thing, and that's what's cool about it, because then it can be interpreted differently too. So it'll never really be exactly what it might have been intended to be or what you hoped it would be, but it'll be its own thing and it'll have its own life.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone today about the fact that she was asking, did you read the titles of the tracks? Because we listened to something. And then I said, no, I never read titles of tracks. And I also never listen to lyrics. So I don't know why I wanted to be a songwriter, but I don't listen to lyrics. I'm a crazy Prince fan, and I have all the albums. And I only know the lyrics to Prince songs up until this point that when they stopped adding CD leaflets.
Right.
With all the lyrics, when maybe in 95 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then, I haven't actually had any reason to look lyrics up, and I never paid attention to lyrics. And I think music it doesn't mean, I can still listen to Prince and really appreciate what Prince is without listening to the lyrics or knowing the titles of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe maybe this is because I come from humanistic social science background, but the author is dead. I thoroughly believe in that. The interpretation that's going to be the one that sticks is your own interpretation of things, like how you perceive something that you listen to. So, yeah, I think you're right that they are going to interpret, the listeners are going to interpret whatever the soundtrack is to them.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever I meant with my 1/16 too short crescendo doesn't really matter. So
you tap into something that really struck a chord with me when I was studying English, was because we read so much literature, but we also read so much literary criticism. And there were so many schools of thought. Like there's certain types of criticism where you have to factor in the author's life and their background because the meaning is all tangled up in that. And then there's other schools of thought where that is irrelevant. The work speaks on its own. And then the others are like, it's all about the reader. And then it's all about the historical circumstances. And there's so many ways you can look at it that you can almost interpret anything any way you want. But I think like it just helped me so much because I realized that the meaning is kind of like, it's like alive, or almost. It depends just on you, really, how you decide to look at it. And that's really everything in life. You get a chance. You can interpret anything that happens, even if it's something somebody says on Twitter, for what it is. Just the words on its own, or who said it, makes a big difference, or who you are and what time period it was written in. All that stuff is a factor, and it helped me, I guess, because I actually struggled with my English classes when I was in high school. They were probably like my worst classes, but because I just thought like the themes and the meanings were like almost as if they were handed down to teachers on a stone tablet. And I guess if I didn't get it right, or I saw it a different way, I was wrong. But like I finally learned in college that that's not the case. There's no wrong answer. If that's what you got out of it, that's what you got out of it.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah, it's the interpretation is always going to be inside someone's head, and no one else can have access to that, regardless of the words that are used to try and communicate it, right?
Yeah, we all bring so much to the table from our histories and backgrounds that no one ever hears it the same way. Probably you never even hear it the same way twice.
No.
Because we're always changing too.
Yeah. It's funny. I have audiovisual synesthesia very heavily. So for me, music is primarily visual.
Right.
And people think I'm mad when I say this. Because whenever I listen to music, or if I write it too, I see the music primarily. And then I do, of course, hear it, but my primary impression of the music is visual. But when you say this to someone who doesn't have audiovisual synesthesia, it's like, what are you talking about? Music, of course, comes through the ears, and it's like a listening experience. So it's interesting to think that, no one else is going to be able to see what goes on in my head. It's crazy times in there. I think that's why I don't have any space for lyrics. It's just wild fireworks going on when I hear music.
Well, does that help you composing for games? Because you've got now a visual element?
Yeah, but I don't see visual pictures necessarily. I mean, I see pictures, but it's nothing to do with actual figurative pictures. But yeah, it does help me in composing in general, because I see textures a lot when it comes to sound, and it helps me think, this piece has so and so many round textures. I need a hairy texture, to complete the picture. Or I see colors as well. So I have a little bit of I hear those or see those colors, and there is something that's missing, and I can sort of identify that visually. It's very hard to explain, I think, but I definitely get it with if I do a piece that is very mellow, let's say, with not so high frequencies maybe, and just pretty rounded, then I can hear that it lacks white hairy textures, for instance. It's really weird. I don't know how to explain it to other people, but it is. It does help me to complete a soundscape in my head, at least, so that it feels complete to me. And it helps me identify what's lacking, or when there's something that's too much of something.
That's pretty interesting. I don't have that, but I guess something that kind of like a breakthrough I've had in my own like music making and arranging and stuff is trying to find put things in like specific frequencies or by textures almost. Like if things are smooth, we need something a little rougher to balance the contrast, I guess is what I'm talking about, really.
Yeah.
But it sounds kind of fun, what you have.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've read somewhere that there are very few people with synesthesia who don't like it. That came out wrong. Most synesthetes like their synesthesia, it appears. And I couldn't imagine being without it because I don't understand how people listen to music without visual elements.
Right.
So when people just say, no, I don't see anything, I just hear it. I don't even understand what that is because I never hear anything without seeing it. Also, people's voices or just anything from the sound of my breathing to the fridge. It's always just full of visual cues to everything auditory. So it's this is also partly why I believe that the author is dead. Because I can't convey my own experience to anyone. So it's subjective to me. And then I also wouldn't be able to understand what the author was meaning if they had the same crazy times going on inside. So,
right.
But, I mean, I don't mean that there is only one valuable way, just that all the interpretations are equally valid and valuable and interesting, really.
Well, I guess we don't really know how any other person sees anything or hears anything. I've thought about that with my dogs with music. What are they hearing when they hear music? They're a much different ear than we have. But I suppose that's the same could be said really about humans. It's interesting, but it's cool too. It's just another fascinating aspect of all of this stuff.
Yeah. And I was just, I started teaching music production to a 10-year-old girl. And we were playing with some kind of synth, software synth. And then we hit a key where she's like, oh, what a horrible sound. And then I said, well, I can't hear it. And she almost fell off the chair. Like, what? You can't hear that? It's terrible. It's cutting my ears. And of course, it was over my frequency range because I'm 40 years old. And it was so fun to see just how she got this, wow, someone else experiences it something completely different to me.
Yeah.
And I felt that was a great moment when she was like, oh, what? You can't hear that? And then that just says something about how we all hear things differently. Also, depending on our senses, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. Crazy.
Yeah.
We're all in our own little worlds in a weird way.
Yeah. And,
well, listen, it's been really great talking to you. I know it's a bit later for you, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but it's been really nice tapping into all this stuff, your background and how you hear music and your work and how that's evolved over the years. It's really cool, and it's I think it's a nice thing for people to keep in mind that we're all kind of constantly developing and changing, and it's not always deliberate, and sometimes it's a little bit surprising, but it's a path you just got to keep traveling on.
Yeah, and it's never too late. It's never too late to turn back to music if you had it before, and it's never too late to begin doing music.
Right.
So
it's a great attitude.
We'd love for people to come and take part in the challenge if they feel like they want to try out making music but haven't necessarily done it before.
Yeah.
It's wide open.
Yeah. Why not, right? Like you said, what do you have to lose? So they can go to musicweeklieschallenges.com. That's kind of a webpage you have, but it seems like the Twitter is the where a lot of the action happens.
Yeah, the community is based on Twitter. And we also have SoundCloud where we share the stuff, but mainly people post stuff to Twitter via their SoundCloud, and then we make playlists on SoundCloud and everything. Or they share it on YouTube or whatever. But it is really on the Twitter profile or on Twitter that the challenges really happen. So you can find us at Music Weeklies. That's our handle. And love for you to take part as well.
Yes. Well, we were talking. about doing one. You said May 15th. We'll come up with like a challenge together, and that should be fun. I'm going to give it some thought and figure it out. But maybe even by the time this goes up, I'll put something in the beginning of the show, kind of. Well, I guess we don't announce it till the 15th, so I won't announce it.
No, no, it's going to be 8 p.m. British time is when we drop new themes.
Okay.
So so that's when the theme will be launched. 15th, May 15th, 20 or 8 p.m. British time. So that's 5 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time or whatever it's called over there.
Yeah, something like that. Nice. So, yeah, we'll have that for May 15th. So, yeah, we don't want to give away the challenge early, give people a head start.
No. It's going to come on the 15th, but it's great. It will be great to have you as part of it, because I feel like our mission is largely on both sides to encourage people to write music, to try new things, and just to go with the flow a little bit and try different things on without judgment, really.
Yeah, and that is so important and hard to do, but to turn off that judgmental brain is it's a skill to work on, and this is a great way to do it.
Yeah. But it also helps to have an encouraging community around you that will tell you that, okay, this is cool. Almost, if someone doesn't think it's cool, then someone else will. And it's, we can guarantee feedback on your piece if you come and write something in our challenge. So all we ask is that it's original, because we don't do copyright infringement.
Right. Well, that's cool.
So,
and where else can you get that guarantee that you'll get some feedback, right? That's pretty valuable on its own.
I know. It's, there is a lot of people in music who just want to show off what they're doing, and they're not so interested in helping others, maybe. I mean, there is largely people who are into community in music, but I think sometimes we just get communicated through mainstream media that music is something big and important, and then to just leave that lie for a little bit is actually kind of nice, and to focus on just doing it for the pleasure of it, really.
Right. Oh, I love it. It's super cool. So everyone should go to the Twitter at Music Weeklies. You can go to musicweeklieschallenge.com. And we could also send them to your site, Schenck.no. So that's SCHENCK.no. And anywhere else you want to direct the people?
I'm pretty active on Twitter, and my handle is Tinelinen, which is TINELINEN. Okay. And other than that, I think it's okay.
Great.
So thanks for having me and us.
Oh, thank you.
I shall say.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to have you and share this with people. I think this could be a great thing for a lot of people, so I hope they get involved.
I hope so.
Thank you for taking the time to tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And I look forward to have you work on a challenge with us.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Okay,
and thank you to everyone that's listening. And
thanks.
We hope you have a good day.